Good evening. I'm Megan Carter, and I'm the director of SDC Foundation, an organization dedicated to the art of directors and choreographers. It's a huge pleasure to be here in LA with you. Big thanks to SAG Foundation for being a partner in this and making it incredibly easy. Tonight is our third one-on-one conversation this year, and I'm very happy to introduce Tom Moore, an award-winning theater, film, and television director who directed Night Mother for the stage with Kathy Bates, and the film with Sissy Spacek and Anne Bancroft, as well as the original production of Grease, which launched the careers of John Travolta, Richard Gere, Patrick Swayze, and many more. His stage work in LA includes a celebrated production of The Royal Family starring Kate Mulgrew and Marion Seldes at CTG. His prolific TV career includes shows such as ER, Mad About You, LA Law, The Wonder Years, and he brought together an exceptional cast which included Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Drew Carey for the Stephen Schwartz musical film Geppetto. Tom recently completed a documentary, The Flight Fantastic, a story of legend and legacy on the flying trapeze, which had its Australian premiere last month and will come to the US in the fall. Tom has worked with some of the greatest actors of our time, and tonight he'll be talking about the actor-director collaboration with the extraordinary Annette Bening, an award-winning actor who really doesn't need an introduction. Her recent films include The Search, The Face of Love, Ruby Sparks, and The Kids Are All Right. She'll appear on screen with Al Pacino in Danny Collins next. In addition to her storied film career, she is a gifted stage actor, most recently seen in the Public Theater's King Lear and in the Ruth Draper monologues, which she also directed at the Geffen. Please welcome Tom Moore and Annette Bening.
That's kind of how I felt. It's a great opportunity. Because this started out an SDC event, I'm going to take the lead, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
In that list of all the people I've worked with, there's one person missing officially. And that's this woman sitting here to my left, which I'd like to, maybe this could lead to a remedying of that situation by the end of the hour. But we did have something deeply in common, and that was a theater, American Conservatory Theater, and a mentor in the genius Bill Ball. And I want to read something to you, but it turns out that Annette was in my production at ACT of The Three Sisters. And she played one of the carolers, I believe, right? Because she was in the conservatory at the time.
I was a townsperson.
And brilliant, of course, as you'd expect. But just to get this rolling, I just want to see what Bill Ball says about the actor in his book, A Sense of Direction. It takes great courage to act. An actor is a hero. All acting is praiseworthy if for no other reason than the actor has the courage to walk from the wings to the center of the stage. For his entrance alone, he should be praised. Speaking in the voice and person of another individual with a commitment to a belief in that individual's emotional life is not only praiseworthy, it's awesome. Those of us who have the opportunity to assist the actor by making his path more smooth are honored to aid her, and we are grateful for the great gifts she bestows on us. His creativity, her wit, his humanity, her suffering, his imagination, her courage. In other words, his complete and perfect self. That's the tradition we come out of. I would like to say that I started my career knowing all that and feeling all that. But I was so desperate to protect my belief in what I was doing that sometimes I didn't recognize, and it came later. I told Annette that I was going to start out by asking the first question. One of her great triumphs in Los Angeles recently, I know many of you got to see it, I was out of town, were the Ruth Draper monologues. And universally praised. Interestingly enough, there was no outside director Annette was the director. So my question is, did you miss anything about having an outside director?
Yeah, I missed having an audience because I have some friends here who are actresses, so I know I'm not alone. We are hams. We like to perform, and so that's probably one of the most important things that the director does for you is watches. And of course, the great directors are fascinated, and they love you. Like Bill Ball, my God. That is so beautiful. I know that's in his book. I feel better about myself already just hearing Bill Ball say that. No, but yes, I think that was that I missed, but I didn't miss it a lot. I felt very liberated by not having someone there, and I went through a kind of back and forth process of deciding whether or not to have a director, and so I arrived at that choice, sort of going back and forth. Part of me thought, yeah, I should just do it. Ruth Draper, never had a director, so she was sort of this genius. She wrote all of these pieces. For those of you who don't know, this woman that I was performing monologues, only a few. She created 56 over a lifetime. And she performed all these different characters, and she performed in different languages, and some of them were very comedic, and some were very serious, and she would do a scene, and then she would do different people within the scene, and the complexity is just genius. And she just did it herself. She just made them up, and then she, I think, rehearsed a lot. She didn't talk a lot about her process, but she worked very hard. So she did it herself. So then I felt, oh yeah, I was liberated by that. I also wanted, she would have people come in and put props down and sort of dress the stage as she was going from one. No, actually, I think she would always enter and exit because they're all written that way. So that, of course, made it simpler because then someone else could come out and adjust a chair. I mean, she used a chair, a shawl, a bench. I mean, she was very, very simple. So, yeah.
So who did you use for feedback if you didn't have a director before you hit an audience?
I got some very good advice from John Lithgow, who is a friend who had done a one-man show. And he told me, oh, you don't need a director.
I've always loved John Lithgow. I'm not so sure now.
And he said, I'll come and watch. He said, get a good stage manager, and I'll come and watch you. And just get a few friends to come and watch you and give you notes. Oh my God, I'm speaking to the directors. This is the wrong thing to say.
You know,
I said that, and I thought, yeah. What do I need them for?
I think as directors, this is what we are most afraid of.
Okay. So then I got into the process, and I was, I learned it took me so long to learn it. It was crazy. I mean, I've never worked so hard in my life, and I would think to myself, why am I doing this? Oh yeah, I know why, I guess. But so then John came to watch me, and then I had an actress friend of mine who I was at ACT with named Rodwin Rodriguez, who I really trust, who was in my class. I adore her. She's a veteran stage actress, and I knew she would be encouraging, but I knew she would give me ideas. And then John came, and John was very critical, and he gave me lots of notes. He said, well, where is the child? When the child comes in, I couldn't see that at all. And he was really good. I mean, he really gave me...
He was directing.
He was. So I should have credited him. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's true. Oh, and Randy Arney, who runs the Geffen, who I really trust and adore, I knew he would be helpful. Let's see. And then when I was in previews, I had friends come. And I had a friend, one of my best friends, who's not an actress, just a very brilliant person and has seen a lot of theater. She gave me a really good note. So I had people making suggestions.
Are you easily open to that?
That's a good question. I think I am pretty open. Yeah, of course, I'm very sensitive.
Aren't we all?
So if anybody says something mean, I don't like it. No, I'm open. I mean, that Bill Ball, who was, sort of taught the tradition in the way that I was trained, is that you say yes to everything. You try everything. And that always seems to be a good idea, doesn't it?
Well, his thing, and I mean, this is not a new idea, of course, but was never say no to the creative idea.
Yes.
And I think it may be the most important building block in terms of working with actors or with any production, because that's where the magic happens, is because of that. Whatever you did, you seem to do it extremely well. So in this particular case, it was okay. You didn't have a director.
Okay. Thank you.
I've worked with John several times. Is there a nicer person in all of show business?
No, he did King Lear. He played exactly. King Lear in the summer.
So how was that? Let's segue to that, because that's a challenging play on every level. Yeah. And Dan Sullivan, I know, had directed you also in Hedda Gabler.
Yeah.
And so what was the experience like being in the park? Had you ever done a park production?
No. I had auditioned when I first went to New York, and I couldn't get in. I almost got a part, but I came close, but I didn't get one. So, it was incredible. It was like playtime for me. It was completely joyous. It was, the company was so convivial, and we all got on very well. And I got on with my two sisters, even though I'm really horrible in the play. We got on so well. No, it was just so much fun. And John has this joyous buoyancy about his life and everything. And I was completely partial to the entire experience. I really was I loved doing it. And I loved being in the theater, too. Once we got into the park, you're in these kind of small quarters, and I really enjoyed that. And I enjoyed the camaraderie. And then, of course, being in Central Park, I had done quite a bit of Shakespeare outside when I started in different festivals, but somehow being in the middle of New York City, outside, in the summer, at night, listening to the play. I enjoyed sitting backstage listening to the play almost as much as being in the play. And I would just sit behind and just listen over and over and over to it. So it was great.
I know John blogged about the experience of finding the character.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you read those blogs and if it paralleled your experience as you came.
He told us actually he asked us at the beginning. He blogged for the New York Times. So
they were in, I think, once a week.
Yes. And so at the beginning, I think he asked us for permission, and we all went, okay. And of course, he only said nice things and eliminated. I mean, there wasn't any big dramas going on behind the scenes, but that was great. And there were some things that I wasn't there for. That I know he told one story about all the guys and. In his hunt, Lear comes in from the hunt. And so all the guys have to come in with their bows and arrows, and they had to make up dialogue. It was all very funny. No, he's so witty, and his energy is just incredible. We were all exhausted, and he seemed to have more energy than anyone. But you only do 6 shows a week. And for actors in the audience. See, you're all directors. You don't care.
No, there's half actors.
Oh, half actors. Okay, then. 8 shows a week. 6 is a lot different than 8.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're not, so we couldn't do matinees. You don't do matinees there. So that was also very cool.
One of the things that you speak about with John speaks of 2 things. One, the generosity of spirit, and what I think a director needs to put into the rehearsal room. And John, when you do something with John, you can't go to a negative place. It simply will not happen.
No.
And if it does, he'll just steer it back. I mean, he's really gifted that way. I mean, I firmly believe that one of your primary jobs as a director is to create that space in which you all can create the magic that takes us somewhere that we could only imagine, or not even imagine. something beyond that. Anyway, I think he's one of those special people that does that. Did you like working on Goneril? I mean, was it a good?
I did.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. And I loved, I mean, I've studied the play for a long time. And so restudying the play from now that I'm a parent, of course, I found it fascinating. I found it very interesting. Specifically, there's this, at the beginning of the play, you know, he divides up the kingdom, and then he says, okay, I'm going to go to your house, and then I'm going to go to your house. And I'm going to take these soldiers with me and these knights with me. And so that's sort of the first problem. So he comes to my house, and I start complaining. So, you know, this is really not working out. The whole thing with the guys, and they're partying, they're making too much noise. And he overreacts. And he says, "You're ungrateful." And now I understand that moment.
Oh, wow.
Now that I'm a parent.
Wow. How
Yeah, because
interesting.
really when you think about it, it's kind of a leap. It's like, well, that's not really the problem. The problem isn't that I'm not grateful to you, but that's what Shakespeare, and Shakespeare says monster ingratitude, which I think is one of the great things that he wrote. And of course, there's all kinds of brilliant poetry about that subject, about Lear's rage over the ingratitude of his children. And I'm not saying my children are like Goneril and Reagan. And
He really doesn't mean it.
No, but there's, you know, I think every parent feels that moment of, do you know what you don't know? You weren't there when I gave birth to you, and they don't know. And so I know that for me, I spend a lot of time thanking my parents because I have great parents. My parents are still alive. They still like write me emails and go and say, "I'm going to the movie on the first day, honey." Isn't
So
that
sweet.
cute? I know.
It's adorable. It's adorable.
No, and when my kids say thank you to me, which they often do, it's like, oh, that feels so good.
You know, it's so interesting to hear you say about that play, because I've said often, I've seen my last King Lear, I'm never going again, because I can never get past that moment.
What moment?
The moment you're just talking about.
Oh,
And
the
I really
leap.
can't, yeah, because I think the crazy man, he has now just set in motion the entire play, and he will be destroyed by it, because he simply is not having the perspective. So anyway, what you say makes a great deal of sense to me. I think it's a
interesting.
really interesting conceptual way to do it. How did Dan Sullivan, you know, directors never get to be in the room when another director is directing. And we're all big fans of Dan. And,
Yes,
and
we are.
I'm sure you are. And I just would like to know how he approaches something like that. Do you spend a lot of time in dramaturgy?
We did, and he clearly was preoccupied with the play in the best way that those great plays can do. And so his quest was ours. So we all sort of joined in that. He spent a lot of time on the text. And we had this brilliant James Shapiro from Columbia University who just wrote a book about Shakespeare in America, sort of tracing when Shakespeare was first done here and all the various productions and the history of it. But he's this great New Yorker who is this brilliant Shakespearean dramaturg. He goes to the RSC, and he's very sophisticated and fancy, and so we had him. So usually, you know, you're consulting various editions, trying to figure out, what exactly am I saying? And we had him. And he's the kind of guy, you know, you turn and say, well, so what does this really mean? And he'll say, you're saying, fuck you. You know, he'll say things like that. I don't think he would mind me saying that. So no, that for me was just an intellectual feast to hear everybody's questions and everyone, and the fact that we had this genius guy there. So Dan, yeah.
Did you stay at the table for a long time doing
I
it,
think
or did
about a
you
week.
start going back and forth
Oh no,
between feet?
we were at the table.
Yeah.
I think we were at the table for about a week.
Yeah.
And then Dan, no, we had a bare stage. Nothing, just bare. And then we did end up with a bench, and he was very trying to, nothing. He was trying to keep everything away, and props and all that. I like props. I tend to kind of want to hold on to something. Perhaps that's a weakness of mine.
I don't know any actors that don't really love props.
I know. It's
I
very
really don't.
helpful.
Well, it attaches you to the reality,
Yes.
you know, of any given scene, whatever it is. I don't know how you can function without a prop. I don't know how I can function without a
You know,
wall.
I just saw a production in London of A View from the Bridge.
Yeah, it's going to be on NT Live.
Right, okay, so there's a gray, this guy is a very famous kind of conceptual director. I'm forgetting his name. And there's this
Of course,
gray
he's a director.
cube. That's not that important, see, it's Arthur Miller and the actors really made it work.
I'm beginning to understand.
So no, this is a production. It's a gray cube, and everyone's dressed kind of in gray, and there's no kitchen sink, and they have nothing, and they're so great.
Wow.
He really did a great job, and all of the actors are. It's sort of their, yeah. It's a conceptual approach, and so at first when I saw it, when it started, I thought, also because I saw another production that he had done that I didn't think was quite as successful, that was conceptually very similar. Anyway, it was great. And nobody had anything to hang on to, except the lawyer carried his shoes around. The lawyer is sort of the voice of God, or he talks and he introduces the play and interjects. And so he was in a suit, but he was barefoot, and he carried his shoes around. But it worked. I don't know. What can I tell you?
I actually
it
saw
was
a
amazing.
production of In Home of King Lear, actually, over there, that was very simple like that.
Oh, yes.
Which was
I
which was
would
powerful.
love to have seen that.
You know, I've never had a chance to, with an actor, when you're working with them, you're constantly having to try to figure out your own dynamic. And I've never actually sat down with an actor and said, what would make you happy and what would make you unhappy? So I want to ask you, you've worked with, I mean, your resume goes on and on. It's impressive by every level, as they've appreciated you for. And you've worked with, I would say, pretty much the gamut of different kinds of directing. Where are you happiest? Who, you can, since we're on the positive, if you want to use names, you certainly can, but
Sure.
who has brought you the greatest joy in terms of that actor-director collaboration?
Well, I've been pretty lucky because also when I think about people I really liked working with, it's not only the very fancy people, but it's interesting. It really, the movies and the stage are different in that way because movies are really the director's medium. And you are in their hands in a way, in a different way than you are in the stage. So it's interesting. So I'm thinking about, for movies, for example, I usually, after we usually have a chance to talk. Sometimes you don't. You're literally doing it with no rehearsal at all, which is so odd, but that's what happens. So you've been talking and you've been exchanging ideas. So when you get to the set, it's not as though nothing has ever already been exchanged. But then there's always the day that you're doing whatever the scene is. And generally, once we are actually shooting it, I like to have a go at it without anybody saying anything to me. I like to have one shot where I'm just, I've been thinking about it for however long, a lot. And then it's so weird in movies because, of course, then you only have that one day or maybe 2 days to do it, and then it's over, and you've done it, and you're on to something else. So I generally like to have a go at it before someone starts talking to me. And simple is always better. But I think that's also different in the movies. When I started doing movies, I expected the directors to be more verbose because I think all of us that work in the theater are more we all talk a lot more, and we talk about the play and what we think, and then we fall in love, and la la la. And there is a lot that's sort of different in the movies. So once you're cast, it's generally faster, slower, louder, softer. It's nothing big and conceptual, you know what I'm saying? But those things are huge. Can you just make it, turn this way a little bit, and It's small things, but they make a huge difference in movies because it's all about detail.
Well, I think they make a huge difference. I mean, I love working with actors who can switch from talking about concept or switch from the substance to technically this will make it work. Because sometimes you cannot find the verbiage in that moment to pass on what you want, except if you'll just look out there toward the horizon, something different is going to happen. You know, it's that Michael Chekhov thing, action begets emotion. Films are very different. Do you like to do, I tend to rehearse too much, quite frankly. It's just something when I first started doing film. I just do, because it's what I was familiar with, and I quickly
You mean before you ever start shooting, or once?
Shooting.
Oh, I see.
Do you like to have that 2 weeks that a lot of films get? Or
I've never had to. Well, no, that's not true. I've got, I guess, a couple of times. So it's very rare. It's almost never now, especially because so many things that I am interested in doing in movies are done for a very small amount of money. So, although, you know, some of the passion projects, you're all working on it beforehand because you all just want to anyway, so you've really been rehearsing. So you're not practicing what you're going to do. That's not what you're doing when you're rehearsing. You're getting to know each other, you're talking, you're getting the way other people communicate, you're understanding how he or she, the director, is approaching it, and you get that, you begin to build that. I mean, it's so fun, right? It's just a joy. And you're all falling in love, and you're all getting to know all the intimate stories and sharing why the story moves you and what it is that is driving you, you know, crazy about it, and what it is that's keeping you up at night, and all the stuff that you share, and that intimacy, that crazy intimacy that we have in our business that is just so appealing about it for me. So, yeah.
Well, I think it's appealing to any of us. I mean, community of the theater or community on a set.
Yes.
And on a set, it becomes instantaneous because you're joining together in true lunacy, the very
Yes.
idea. You're going to create something, as you say, that day, and there'll be no other chance.
Yes.
Is a remarkable leap of faith, I think. When you decide to do a film, how big a decision, I understand if a director has written it or he's developed it, but how big a decision is who the director is and whether you're going to do it or not?
Well, I read it, and if I like it, then it's the absolute, you know, most important thing. But it's very hard, I think, when you're a director to talk about what you do. So I feel quite, what's the word? I don't like putting people in that position, even though I know what it's like to be put in a position to have to audition for someone or go in and meet someone and be yourself, like they tell us all the time. Which really made me nervous at the beginning when I started. That just terrified me. That was how naive I was, because I was so conditioned to playing parts that part of it was actually, it was mostly just insecurity, but I always thought, well, why do you need to talk to me? Do you know what I mean? How ridiculous. Now I understand. But I didn't understand the camera. I didn't know that the camera sees something, no matter what you do, that has nothing to do with anything that you're directing or creating.
Directors, I mean, it's very hard, I think, for directors too, because in many ways, we're also having to protect you from the sense of the pressures of the day. Do you know? So the important thing is to constantly, again, keep that space safe. But I do think there are people you just instantly meet that you either have a rapport with and you think it's going to work, or you don't. And can you sometimes work with people even though you think, I'm never going to have anything to say to this man or woman after rehearsal?
Oh, that's a good question. I suppose so.
If you love the material that much, would you just say, okay, somehow we'll make this work?
Well, sometimes you kind of go on your gut instinct, for sure. If I have a really, I guess if I have a really funny feeling about someone, I might not do it. But yeah,
Well, the thing is, you really take chances. I mean, your resume is full of things that many have had enormous success, but I'm sure that on concept, they didn't necessarily guarantee that. And you seem to be totally willing to do that, which is not true of a lot of actors, I find, that have reached your level of picking and choosing. And so that's impressive. So this question I've always wanted to ask an actor too. What drives you crazy with a director in terms of what can a director do in terms of either work or what they say that can truly stop you in your tracks, dead?
Well, I try not to let anything do that. One of the things that was very valuable at ACT was the first thing that we were taught in our first classes was, okay, do a scene, pick a scene, a 5-minute scene with your scene partner, and go off and just do it. Just do the scene. Work together. You're applying the principles that they're teaching you in your class, and then you go and you perform the scene. So they very much teach you, go where you want to go. Get up and go do what you want. So that for me that's how I always am. I don't ever wait for anybody. If somebody wants to say something, I'm completely open. No, but you know what I mean? I don't know. I get up and do stuff. And people love that. Because then they can say, oh, you know what? It's a little bit soon. But I like the idea of you going over and hitting the lampshade. But just do it a little bit later, or don't do it, or whatever. But at least it's like gives somebody something to work with. And generally, that works out better, rather than, shall I stand here? Or whatever.
No!
Yeah, so I suppose if somebody, no, and actually though, there is I can think of a production where, so we were doing that. We were just going wherever we wanted to go. And I hadn't done a play in a while, and I didn't want to say anything. And so we just kept doing that, right? We just kept going where we wanted to go. And I was saying, okay, fine, I'm doing this play, what the hell? I'll just keep, trying different things. And then eventually somebody said to the director, you've got to stage the play. They had a breakdown, And I thought, oh, that's a good point. I should have mentioned that.
I think a director needs to set a framework in which the actor can function. I think, I think what you pray for is somebody like you that's going to constantly bring things that you can choose from. Because I think directing at its best is editing, just like film is made through the editing process. And so when that happens, it's you have things to choose. But if you don't have any idea, I just think things just start going out the window. And I find if you wait too long, and I've seen directors do this, then they can never pull the production back together again, and then it creates conflict. But,
yes, no, that's very unpleasant. Yeah.
to say the least. So I think we know what you would hate particularly. But I have a feeling that what you would hate even more than not having the frame is someone stopping you from simply exploring. Am I right?
Yeah, that doesn't sound good. I've definitely worked with people who are very good, and I'm thinking about some movie directors who, you're doing a scene and you have something very technical. Okay, now reach out. No, a little bit further, right there. When you reach out, just that far. Okay, don't go that far or that far, go right there. And then turn just a little bit more, right there. Can you just hit that? That happens.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah, because, and of course when you see the movie, you think, oh yeah, you don't know it, but that it does make a difference. The difference between that and that can be big.
Well, sometimes the director, composition-wise, there's simply no way you can know unless you go look at the shot beforehand, which I don't think is a good idea necessarily for an actor.
You mean for the actors to look?
For the actor to look before. I know people feel differently about whether they should see after. I don't encourage it, but I know some people love to. Do you like to see takes after they're done? Do you like to judge where you are?
Generally, I don't have to. I sort of, maybe it's because I've done it for a while. I've been on movies where everybody's running and looking at the monitors, but I try to stay away from it because I'm very critical of myself. I have difficulty. Sometimes sometimes I like watching myself, but I also, I can be very critical. And I don't want to do that to myself. I want to stay out of that critical mind. I don't want that mind involved. So because I'm trying to just be free.
Well, I think that's what the director needs to do, because I don't know how actors can do that. I'm so impressed with actors, and some can't.
You can learn a lot.
Can direct and do it. Absolutely. In fact, Kathy Bates, when she was learning to use film, we used a television series, LA Law, and she came and did something simply so she could sit with me and see what was reading, what wasn't reading, how big she could go, how small she could go.
Yes, no, it's enormously beneficial, actually,
Yeah.
sometimes to watch. And it's not, so it actually can be very helpful.
But I think if you've got an actor who is going somewhere, it's always dangerous if you pull them into that objective position, I think. But maybe that's controlling on my part. I don't know. If they have to do it, obviously I'm going to let them.
Usually it just takes a lot of time too.
Right.
I mean, that's the other thing about it, and time is money, and so there isn't usually time. One thing I really enjoy, and once in a while I get to do it in movies, is improvising. To me, that makes me so happy. I love it. I love it. And I've got to do it a couple of times recently, and I was just in hysterics. I mean, I was so, maybe because as I get older, there's a little more freedom. Sometimes just because it's like, well, who cares, what's what?
And at
What's
this
the worst
point,
that can happen? I'm
exactly,
terrible.
exactly.
And they
You
have
won't
it
have
on
a
film
career
forever. Oh my God. No, there's a little bit of that. So, but that also isn't. I mean, that's also unusual, because people spend a lot of time carefully writing screenplays for a good reason. But then sometimes there's something that's happening in the moment that you might be able to like grab a little piece of here or there that works.
And again, it's that
yes.
magic of the moment. And
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic. It's fantastic, I think, for most directors to have that in the editing room, because all of a sudden something you thought was brilliant is not so brilliant.
Yes.
And all of a sudden you have that. Do you think you're better on your first takes or your later takes?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think it depends. I haven't done a movie for quite a while where we did a zillion takes, because again, it's so expensive. I guess generally I'm probably better at the beginning, but not always. And I don't, and there is definitely, I understand how I'm not the best judge sometimes. Or sometimes you'll be doing a number of takes, and then you'll think, oh my God, number 3 was so much better. And then after, if you were to go back and look at it, after a while you'd think, I felt different inside, but what was so different about the moment? Maybe it wasn't so
I think
different.
as a director, unless you are right by the lens, you have no idea what take. I think many of us spend too much time at monitors, away from the actors.
Oh, I miss it. I miss it so much. I made a couple of movies before they had monitors.
Right.
And I had somebody right by the camera. I still miss it.
Well, it's an amazing thing, because you literally, I mean, I've done shows. I did a sitcom with Helen Hunt and Paul Reiser, and Paul Reiser, who's a comic,
Yes.
I would get up and watch the rehearsal, like right here, and he said, could you just move back a little, please? So I get that, but that's the only way you're going to see, because the camera is
Yeah, I know.
in there with you.
Absolutely. No, a lot of directors do that. I
know.
like it. I like everybody getting right in there nice and close. It doesn't bother me at all. A lot of directors do that, and that for me makes me feel safe, because I know somebody's just as
There for you.
just
Yeah.
as interested in all the intricacies as I am.
Do you feel, this is a small thing, but it's just something I've often wondered as a director. I've always felt the way I begin the scene with action, or the way I end the scene, whatever I say immediately after cut, is incredibly important. Is it?
Yes.
You know,
I think it is
because
important.
I think how you lead. I know one director who used to say, and we all just used to laugh, because he'd say, gently, before every take, gently into the scene.
Yeah.
Gently. What does that mean? But I always feel like the energy, or also just saying something positive at the end, so that, because the whole thing about all of what we do is keep the ball in the air. And if you're going to have to
Yes.
do 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or, God forbid, 12, then you need to keep that going.
Yes.
One of the most frustrating things that I've found is sometimes when you're working with an actor, the first takes are beyond brilliant,
Yeah.
and then begins to fade, and the other
Sorry.
one is stage actor. And
It does happen.
it's tough because you think, oh wow, we're going to have to be combining these takes. So you then make sure the continuity is really keeping a close lookout. So, but anyway, it's interesting. So, Mike Nichols.
Yeah.
This is a year of celebrating Mike Nichols. I just noticed last night that even Mad Men dedicated this last section of shows to him, or whatever night it was. And I just wonder, what's it like working? What was it like working with Mike Nichols? How did he approach things? And did he change his plan based on production?
The first time I worked with him, he was working on a screenplay of Postcards from the Edge, and I was
Right.
in New York working on a play, and there were about 4 or 5 actors. He would bring in, I don't know, I think we did it twice, where he would have the screenplay read. So there are 4 or 5 of us, we would read a bunch of different parts, and then I think Shirley MacLaine and Meryl Streep were there for each, I think they were there for each of those readings. So then he would listen to it, and then they'd go away and work on it. In that case, it was Carrie Fisher. So we did that a couple of times, and then we made the movie, and I had one scene in the movie. And I had a scene with Meryl Streep, and we were walking and talking. And it was a big crane shot. And so I had no idea where he was. I had no idea where, I was just so nervous. It was at night, it was a night shoot, and I was still I'd made two movies. Wait a minute, I can't remember now, but I was still very much, I just spent so much time feeling like a stage actress, pretending I was a movie actress for a while. I don't even know what that means, but that's how I felt. I didn't feel quite comfortable with the mic and the short little scenes and sitting down and speaking quietly and all of that. It felt very weird to me. So anyway, we were doing the scene and walking and and of course I was with Meryl Streep, so I was, oh my God, I'm with Meryl Streep. And I remember we were doing it. We did it a couple of times, and then somebody said, cut. And I thought, oh my God, they were shooting that. I thought it was another rehearsal. So we had rehearsed it a few times, and then they were rolling, and I didn't know they were rolling. And of course I felt like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot! Here I am shooting this movie with Meryl. I didn't even know we were rolling film. Oh my God. And I don't know why I got very upset about that. That's so ridiculous. It's like, who cares? But I didn't know at the time that it didn't matter.
Do you like to know? That's an interesting question, though, to me. Do you like to know if they're shooting the rehearsal? Or do you feel?
Yes.
Do you feel cheated
I'm
if
a
somehow
grown-up.
they
I
rolled
want
it?
to know.
I totally.
Don't try to fool me.
I totally understand that.
Actually, I will say, my husband just made a movie, and he's cutting it right now. And I don't know. Can I say this? I think I can say it. He's so private. I
Totally understand.
I don't think he would mind. But there's a scene. I think I can say this.
By the way, is this the untitled project?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So he hasn't yet titled it. But there was a group of, there's a scene where there's a whole bunch of people just talking and chatting. But what he did was, when everybody in between takes, and there's like about 30 people in the room, and everybody's like talking, all the actors, of course, like we always do. Like, oh my God, here we are making a movie, and everyone's like chatting, and there's like, everybody's talking, and he rolled film.
Oh wow.
I hope he doesn't mind me saying that.
Wow.
And it's so great. No, don't say anything. So it was so great. And then I thought, wow, that's what we try to do. We try to reproduce that kind of a experience, of course, that doesn't look fake. But Anyway.
Well, it's so hard sometimes to, if something has happened magically, either like happened there where he just filmed it when nobody was knowing, or it happens just because of the spontaneity of take. It is so hard to recreate that.
Right,
Almost impossible.
right, but you don't need to,
Yeah.
because if you do have it, then that's the whole idea, and that is the craziness of it, is trying to find that moment that nobody's anticipated, and there's all these machines that conspire against it. There's trucks and there's all
I
these
know.
machines and people and and by the time you get there, it's like, okay, quiet, 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 quiet. Okay, now, be spontaneous. It's like, oh, right, wow, this is hard.
So how do you do that? I mean that's an extraordinary art of the film actress or actor, to be able to concentrate in such a way that the rest of us disappear. How do you do that?
Sometimes I'm very chatty, and sometimes I go sit in the corner. It sort of depends on what I'm doing, yeah, you cultivate ways of making sure that you're remembering that everybody isn't in the room, the camera isn't there. Sometimes I walk into a set and I think, oh yeah, I forgot all these people were going to be here. I thought it was just me and the other person in the room. So it's very important. But I also love the camera. So I've learned how that it does so much for you as an actor. And if you begin to say, okay, come on in, it's okay. I know, I'm scared. I'm always nervous. I'm always scared when I'm working. Anybody with any sense is, because of course.
Totally agree with you.
Yeah, you've got to be an idiot not to be nervous. So then it's like, okay, thinking about it's always worse than doing it. Once you're doing it, you're solving the problems.
Right.
You're in it. You're you know, and that's always better.
Well, there is nothing more thrilling than working with people where you are solving the problem. I think any of us that are part of that creative process, that's the moment that makes your life worthwhile. Do you know? And I think that's what happens. That terror, though, of what surrounds technically is amazing. I mean, the camera is a passive instrument, but it is truly there. If a camera loves the actor, and I know that's a cliche since they started making movies, but it is the truth. Some actors, the camera just loves.
Yeah,
And
I know,
if you are honest to the camera, you're going to have a great partnership. Anyway, but that thing of terror, I as a director, I remember the first time I was doing a television show, and I was all prepared and everything was ready, and then I came onto set and the trucks lined up outside, the hundreds of people that were there waiting for me to say action.
I know.
You know, it was terrifying.
Yes.
So
What are we going to do next?
exactly. And I can fake it because I'm a director, and so that's my job to
Yeah,
fake it, but
yeah.
you can't. You have to reveal.
No, absolutely, no, for sure. Just like in a play, you know, you have to. Yeah, then you think to yourself, well, I signed up for this, okay? So there's not a gun to my head. I don't have to be doing this. So at some point you come to terms with that. But there are times that the fear can be. Yeah, I mean, you have to find ways of coping with it. So it's not that it just goes away. It's that you find ways you find healthy ways of dealing with it rather than letting it get you. And if it gets you, you know, then you know it's.
Well, it's also that thing with actors where so often you get on the set and you have to play either one of the most climactic moments of the entire film, or it's an intimate scene and you barely know the person you're working with. That's a remarkable thing. Any way to prepare for that?
Yeah.
It's got to be weird. How can it not be?
Oh no, I think about things a lot, and no, those big days and those big scenes, yeah, they keep you up at night, but I still I warm up and I got on the floor and I roll around, and yeah, you have to find a way to focus. And not let the distractions of waiting or having to do something again. I know there was a scene that in a film that I knew was a great scene when I read it, and then I thought, then eventually there's a day when you have to do it. And so then you do it and you think, phew, done. And then there was one that came back on the call sheet. It was like a nightmare. It's like, wait, I've done that already. But it was a problem with the light, that it's too dark. They couldn't see me. So I had to do it again.
The thing that I always, when I first got into film, always amazed me, they will go past the powers that be. They will go past anything but a technical problem. If there's a technical problem, it will be fixed, no matter what it does to performance, no matter what it does to any of the rest of it. And I think that's a tough one to sometimes deal with. I want to talk about Lisa Cholodenko, because I just am so impressed with her work. I just think she's a remarkable young director. And one of the things that I think is so amazing is the ambiguity and subtlety, but subtlety is not quite the word I'm looking for either. But it's the kind of thing you cannot direct, and yet she's able to get that. Like, I thought in The Children Are All Right, I just thought you were amazing. I remember I ran into her at a party, and I just said, okay, we have to get this out of the way. And I just went up and said, okay, I have to be a fan for a minute. And I went on and on because I thought it was so remarkable, the variety of things that were coming across from that woman to me as I watched it. You know, so how did she set that scene? How did she make it possible for those things to happen? And of course, Oliver Kittredge, I think, is just as brilliant.
Great. I know, I watched it. Amazing. Well, I'll have to tell her that you're singing her praises. She's become a good friend.
I sing her praises.
She's interesting. She's very, like a lot of great, really talented people. This is true of a lot of directors that I'm thinking of. It's hard to put your finger on what it is. Well, certainly she worked for years on the screenplay. She wrote it with her writing partner, Stuart. And it's funny because we've talked together like in this kind of a thing, and she and I have had like totally different perceptions of when we were working on things. So I always find that interesting about her too, because my experience of her, we did rehearse some. We actually I worked on the script a little bit with her. I have a scene where I kind of rant. I'm in the restaurant and I rant about stuff.
Yeah, I remember.
The composting, I'm a little bit drunk. And so we worked on that a little bit. We thought about, what might I rant about? So we did kind of rehearse that, and we had maybe a day or two of rehearsal, and then we were doing it. What I remember about her, like a lot of very good directors, is she just like watched. She just like would be very carefully watching. She didn't insert herself a lot. She knew where to put the camera. She knew where to put the camera, and you notice the camera is very simple in the movie.
Extremely.
Except there's a few, moments where she does something fancy, but that's unusual. Same in Olive Kittredge. You're not thinking about the director when she's directing.
Which is, to me, the sign of great directing.
Yeah. She doesn't call attention to herself.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, she's a great observer and a great listener. She's become a very dear friend. I mean, but you're right. She has that thing where she gets that quality. I don't know how she does
Well,
it.
it's remarkable because it's the kind of thing, of course, I don't think directing can be taught anyway. You can learn everything you need to know as a director, but you either have that instinct.
You're the only
don't.
person on the set without a job.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I have an even bigger theory there. Like when you go onto a set and you don't know the actors of a television series, for instance, I think everyone colludes to pretend that you really are the chief.
Yeah.
When you're not at all. The producer is making most of the big decisions.
Yeah.
The actor is making a zillion times more money than you are, and they're the ones that can get you fired. But mostly actors want that feedback from a director.
Sure.
And they want to trust because I think it's a lonely deal. They're telling us our time is running short. I could really go on.
Are we going to do direct questions?
Yeah, we're going to do that. I have to ask you one more question, though.
Okay.
Charles Dillingham, who I know you know, when I said I was doing this, wrote me and said, Annette is one of the few great movie stars who has managed to remain an equally great person.
Oh. He doesn't know me that well.
which I think is true, because I know how you respect your roots and how you keep close those who've been important through your entire career. But what I want to ask you is, how do you manage to keep grounded? Because you do have a way of somehow remaining Annette Bening the person, even though your life is, from most fans' view, extraordinary. So how do you manage to just stay focused on the important things all the time?
Well, I hope I do. You know, I wanted to have children from when I was a really little kid. I was the little kid that wanted to play with the littler kids. I was the youngest of four, and I really wanted my mom to have another baby. I wanted to be a big sister, and I started playing with the kids in the neighborhood, you know, the little kids, when I was like 8. And I think that was around that time that I really thought I really wanted to be a mom. And that's just what happened to me. I don't know why, but it did. And so I always wanted children. It was always a really big thing in my head that was what I envisioned. And then I did it. So now I'm taking care of them. No, I have 4 kids. So I think having a family has been, you know, it's so fantastic. I'm so grateful for it. And I'm my husband. And I was married before, too. I was married to someone you know, a really good guy. So I even though we parted, I mean, it was a really good experience. And then when Warren and I got together, we started having children. It was interesting because I was thinking about it. Because one of my kids is turning 18, about to go away to college, and I was thinking about when she was really little. I was reflecting on it, and it was also very busy, you know, very busy time. But I think that it humbles you, you know, it really grounds you to have children, and it has been, you know, great for me. I have a wonderful family that I came from as well. I'm very close to my siblings and my parents, and so I think that helps. Just not going through large chunks of time of not working, which I do regularly. I still do, because I have kids at home. So I don't go away, because I just don't do that. You know, during the year, or for like if there's a little bit of time, I can do it. But otherwise, I don't do that. So.
Well, you've done it about as well as it can be done, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
We want to get to these questions, so you go first. We each have a couple, and we'll try to do this in these last few minutes. These came from the audience. I know you had to write them out, so here we go.
Okay, here's one. As an actress, do you ever struggle with confidence? If so, how do you get past it? Oh, it's always, yes, I think that we all do. It's very important to find your own ways of dealing with it, because it's not healthy if you don't have some struggles with it. If you are just have confidence and you don't have those moments, then there's something wrong. So it's more a question of dealing with it. So one of the ways I have always dealt with it is to work on the role, and understanding that the fear is there and that the fear isn't going to completely ever go away. That somehow helps me. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's that, rather than saying, I shouldn't feel this, I shouldn't feel afraid, I'm really scared. So I'll just actually, sometimes I just say to myself, I'm really nervous. I'm nervous right now. This is what it feels like, and I'm really nervous, and I'm, you know, coping with that. Bad reviews are you know, very...
You read them?
Well, you know, in movies it's not as hard because you've done it already, and so you can't, it's different when you're doing a play. And no, when I'm doing a play, I tend not to, because for obvious reasons. Because going out there once you've read a bad review, it's very hard.
I think it's almost impossible to do it the way you were hoping to do it once you've seen something. It's always in your head. You know,
Yes.
I would always, unless I had to know in order to protect the cast, I would put off reading something until I was objective about it. Because sometimes reviews say some accurate things, but you can't hear them when you're in the middle of the creative process. You just can't. I've got one from Bill Mendieta. It says, in helming a film that was once a play, can you speak about how you prepared for the film adaptation, from collaborating with the writer to casting new actors in the roles, and your process with the time limitations? This could take an hour in itself, simply because my education in film is obvious and apparent if you see my first film, because we shot it in sequence, which was Night Mother, and you can literally see my growth. Because in the first scenes, I was unsure of myself, and as I gained in confidence, it gained in power. That's an interesting thing, because very few people have had. The reason I did that film is because Marcia Norman insisted on it. I mean, which I wanted, of course, but she insisted they use me to direct the film. It led to my entire career in film and television. It was the beginning, for which I'm forever grateful. But there was an enormous pain from people who had fallen in love with that play on Broadway with Kathy and Anne Petoniak, who were brilliant. But what people don't know, it's Sissy Spacek made that play happen on film, because Kathy at that point did not have the power for that to happen. It just wouldn't have happened. Kathy wasn't rejected. It just wasn't going to happen. And Sissy wanted to do it as a project. There was always that sense from them, am I measuring up? Do you know, to some extent? I'm going to erase this story, but I think it's very funny in terms of directors have to be careful about being too verbose. When I was directing the last scene, I was so excited to reach the last scene, that relief of here you are, it's done. And I have Anne Petoniak by that point, who, by the way, she did not trust me at all in rehearsal. And I literally heard her say to Sissy after we finished our last rehearsal, I think he knows what he's talking about. I think we can trust him. And that's a literal quote. But we really became close friends, in that she used to call me and leave messages on machine, dear Mr. Machine. And anyway, it was incredible in that New York Bronx accent. But it got to that last scene where she's going to literally, she hears her daughter has killed herself at the door, and she goes in and by instruction has to fix the pot on the stove, you know, and then call her son. And I was going on, and then this is what's going to be happening, and you're going to be this. And she said, you know what, Tom? I think I'll just pretend my daughter just shot herself, and we'll see what happens.
Oh, that's fabulous.
I am not exaggerating. That is the truth. And you know, I'm forever grateful. I never made that mistake again. I simply shut up. Do we have time for the other two? Yes. Go ahead. Do you have another one?
What is the best advice you've gotten over your career, and what is one piece of advice you would like to pass on to other actors? Let's see. That's so hard. Well, I started in doing plays because I went to the theater in San Diego, where I was brought up, and I went to the Old Globe Theater and saw a play. My English teacher took us to see a play. I had never seen a play. And that's how I started, and I was a very unsophisticated person in the theater. I just sort of loved it, and I started doing it when I was in then I started doing it in school. Then I went to a community college, and I did it there. And then I went to San Francisco State, and then I went to ACT, and I sort of plodded my way along, and just following what I loved. But I really needed an education. So I tend to emphasize education. But then there are other, like my husband, he went to 1 year of college and quit. And he was just such a different animal. So so it's not always true, but for me, I really needed that. I really needed an education and I needed a grounding. So I tend to advise people to do that, to get a good education. So they have something to offer when they walk in the room.
I totally agree with that, because you can, I mean, unless you've got a commodity that has to be sold right at that moment or you're going to lose your chance, it allows you to have a life. It allows you to go beyond when you're hot or when you're cold. And I just think that's, I had to stay with education because I didn't know what I was doing. It's like what you said, it's how I became a director. And I also tell young actors, you got to work. I mean, it's interesting, work begets work. You've just got to keep the tools in action. And it's interesting what your union, SAG, is dealing with now with this big question, is how is that going to happen? So I guess this is my second question, and we've kind of hit this, but do you approach your process any differently depending on the medium? TV, film, theater. They each have different challenges, and your time with the actors may vary. Your time on the set, any set, is so small that it's practically imperceptible. And I think you always have to hit the ground running. I don't care whether it's film or television. Television is particularly deadly, simply because, not deadly as a medium, because we know how much great work gets done on television, but your pressure of the day, because you're having to shoot so many pages a day. One of the best experiences I ever had was ER, because it's lit. So if the scene's in the ER, I mean, and the number of pages they shot per episode was about half again the usual show. Also, those actors could deliver it. So you could do all that moving camera work. You could have them coming in and out and constantly picking up each other's cues. But I don't think people talk about, I never liked doing sitcoms very much, although I did them too. But people talked about it like doing a little play. I don't think it's like doing a little play at all. I just think that's nonsense. It may be for the actors, but it's certainly not for the directors. It's a fake little play. You know what I mean? And because it's just so arbitrary. But I think not only is it different per medium, I think it's different per project. You know, and sometimes you'll get on a set and the actors, you can feel it. They need more from you. They need to be protected. And sometimes you get on a set and there's a nightmare and you know somebody is not going to help you. And then it's really, what are you going to do? Because the day is still going to come to an end. You know, or you get on a set like I did one time with the art, and the actress couldn't do her lines. And what are you going to do? You have to be good. That's great. Let's try that again. You know, and you just can feel your hours going and knowing you're then going to have to make up for that day. Anyway, I think creativity requires a different approach every single time you approach. And I approach it like Annette does, with great fear and trepidation, and assume basically this is the time they find me out. You know? So where are we in time? I just know I've gotten a signal. Do we have time for another? Okay. Do you have another one?
Which do you prefer, comedy or drama, and why? Comedy is considered to be more difficult to portray. Do you find that to be true? You know what's interesting? I think preferring comedy or drama, I don't have a preference because it doesn't make any difference in a way as an actor. Because if anything, with comedy, you have to be even more committed. It's just the thing you're committed to is ridiculous, but that doesn't, but you don't know that. You, the character, don't know that. And I certainly have done things, many things, that I didn't think were funny, that other people thought were funny. And I've been surprised by that. So that's why it's good to have good training. You just play the truth of it as best you can. And then sometimes it's funny and sometimes it's really sad. And sometimes one audience will think something's funny and another audience won't. That goes in the theater as well as movies, I know. I remember seeing a movie that I did a couple of different times with a big audience. And I remember one time everyone laughed at this moment and I thought, I wasn't trying to be funny. And then the next time they didn't. So it's funny how that works. But no, I mean, getting laughs is really fun. It's so fun. And also, you get the immediate gratification. I think there's a line, I think it's in The Seagull, where the writer, the playwright, who's the Chekhov character, says something about, he imagines, you know, the blonde people in the audience to be inviting and friendly and the dark-haired people to be withdrawn and hostile. But it's sort of like, that's what you, especially in the theater, you know, you begin to, oh, but what happens is also you hear certain people. And you don't ever see them, because of course you can't look at them. That would be wrong. But you hear them.
Good.
And you think, oh, that person, you know, you'll hear a little particular laugh or a particular response, and it's just so delightful to hear that. And then, of course, we all know that I have had, every time I've done a play, I know when I did the Cherry Orchard at the Taper, you know, there are the seats that are right down front, and they're kind of in the light. And every time, someone's always sleeping. And there was one that they weren't just doing that. They were like sprawled. And that's always a great moment, because it's like when Bill Ball says, the actor, even making an entrance, you're an awesome, and then you have someone who just is asleep. And it's like, it's always good for the ego, you know.
I can only imagine in that first scene how that feels. Because I know that
invariably,
scene so well.
Invariably it happens. Right? You hear that. And then it's kind of embarrassing, you know, and then you think that but sometimes the people around them will also you'll hear them.
Well, that's actually, to me, even worse, because then there was all this whispering and looking back and forth, and then you've lost the concentration altogether.
Yeah, that's true. I saw Lawrence Fishburne do a one-man show at the Geffen. It was about the Supreme Court Justice. It was great. Right. He was so commanding. And a woman came in late. And I think he must have done that every time. And he was so great. He just stopped. And she had to like go through all, go down the aisle. And he said, no, it's okay, go ahead. But he was funny, and he was in such command. And he also, I think in the play, he asked a lot of questions. He would say, do you remember in 1970, you know, in 1956? And I actually was like afraid he was going to call on me. He was so...
That's good acting.
Yeah. No, he was so commanding, but he was hilarious.
You know,
I don't know
in terms of an audience interrupting you, I did with John, actually, a production of Once in a Lifetime in New York at Circle on the Square. And it so irritated me that people would get up early from the curtain call that I simply told the cast to lock hands so they would get caught in the middle of the stage. So one day we literally had 20 people caught in the middle of the stage when the curtain call happened.
You mean they walked across the stage?
They would literally walk across the stage. They were just going to get out of the theater.
Wow, no.
I mean, the rudeness sometimes astounds me. You know, comedy, if we could just talk a second about comedy, because it's very hard to me when you're doing it on film, when you don't. Do you like to hear some response from crew, or does that make you crazy? Bill, when I was glancing through the book to find that quote, he talked about he never wants anyone to laugh in rehearsal.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that, but I was just curious how you felt about that.
No, I like it. I like it when people respond. No, and you really do become, in a movie or TV, whatever, with the camera, you become dependent on the crew because they're your only audience. Generally, you get to do it for everybody. You know, you block it and then you do it for everybody that's on the crew. And that, yeah. But it's weird because when you're shooting, of course, it's silent. And so, no, I like it when people laugh.
Well, I don't know how you can keep the atmosphere lively if people don't laugh. I mean, I just don't know how you do, because to me, that's what you're doing.
I
mean,
know.
and if there's enough laughter, I don't think you remember where the laughter came particularly. You just know everybody was having a good time. I love doing, have you ever done a Feydeau?
No.
Oh my God, you would be brilliant in Feydeau.
Oh my God.
And that's something where it is truly technical. Forget the director. You just have to follow his directions absolutely.
You have to follow his stage directions?
His stage directions, because he
Oh.
wrote every line to get from here to here. And if, for instance, everybody's foolish enough to change the set dimensions, it's over. They're
Really?
finished. It's remarkable. You know, he died insane. And I'm sure it was because of interlocking all these things. So he went mad.
Oh my
I have to tell you
God.
one more story. I was doing a Feydeau up at ACT. It was...
Flea in her ear.
Yes, exactly. No, it was a little
Sorry.
Hotel Paradiso. No, Flea in her ear was at the taper. I get them confused sometime too. But this was this was when drugs up in San Francisco were a big thing. And as you know, well, maybe it isn't still a big thing, but the second act is always where things go crazy.
Right.
You know, where it all goes wild. And so literally doors were slamming. People were running in and out, you know, because people were desperately trying to get away before they were caught. And this kid stood up in his drug-addled state and screamed, "Make it stop! Make it stop!" I've always loved that. I've always thought I had directed that well. If
Yes.
I got that kind of.
Make it stop. I like that.
Should we keep going or not? We can keep going.
I think I did. Oh, I did all of mine.
I think,
Anybody? Should we do questions?
yeah, because we're not streaming anymore, are we? Anyway, we are. Well, it doesn't matter. Let's do it anyway. We'll take control until they throw us out. Okay. Let me start in the back there.
He didn't pick you. That was.
I know this woman. She was in that production of Once in a Lifetime with John.
My question is for you. I heard about Mr. Warren Beatty's last project. I know he directed it and you are in it.
Uh-huh.
The first question is, how is it directed by your husband? And the second, if you have a scene with him, and how did your real life dynamics affected your scene?
Unfortunately, I didn't have a scene with him in the movie. I have a small part. I don't have a scene with him. I would have loved that. He is a great director. And I had been, I mean, obviously, we know this. This is well documented. But he, no, actors love him. Actors love him. And we'd been in movies together, but I'd never been directed by him. But I got to do it this time. So I got to do a few scenes, and it was great. It was really I loved it. And I got to improvise. He let me, he said, okay, just do one, just do whatever you want. And no, I
Were
was
you
great.
director's favorite?
I was. He let me do whatever I wanted. No, he is. He's one of those, that's why he's great, is because he is one of those people that just makes you feel, like Mike Nichols was a great audience, just made you feel smart and funny and that you were just it. He makes you feel that way. Mike did, for sure. And Warren very much works on that, in that way with the actors. And he's also very attuned to the priority, and because of course there's all these, everyone's fighting, as the good people do, the great lighting people fight for their thing, and the great sound people say, well, if she's, walking and her heels click, that wrecks the scene, and, somebody has to say, it's okay if her heels click. And then they say, okay, all right, but you're gonna regret it in post, and then,
That's probably the most common line you hear.
But then, and the same with the lighting, the directors is like, always tells the cinematographers, you stay away from the actors, you don't say anything to them. I saw you walk over there and say, can she lean a little bit further into the window? I saw you say that. But, you know, so he's great at really understanding how to set up, like you said, like you were saying before, about setting up the atmosphere and then letting people
well, what you said
do
about
it.
that protecting in terms of that, you do have to keep everybody away from them because they are going to fight so hard, and they, God bless them, I don't think they sometimes really understand what the actor's having to hold on to.
Yeah, and these are great. These are great. I mean,
great artists, extraordinary.
Yeah, when I did a picture with Milos Forman. In fact, this gentleman just passed away. His great cinematographer, Andrzejczyk, and he also didn't speak great English, and I didn't speak Czechoslovakian. But he was one of those guys. You know, if Milos looked the other way, he'd come over and say, yeah, go a little bit more that way, a little bit more that way. And he would start, you know, giving you direction, and then they would have big arguments. And, oh, you don't talk to her, you know, and then they would fight. And at that point, I was just trying to please everyone, so I was just like, oh, you want me to be by the window? I'll go by the window. I don't care.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I know a lot of directors solve it, and I've solved it sometimes that way too. I just keep rolling, which is a nightmare in the editing room because
Keep rolling.
just so you just keep doing another take.
Oh, that's great.
Keep.
Oh, especially with digital.
It's with digital now. Just keep rolling. Keep rolling. Nobody can go in because you're rolling. So nobody is going to go in.
Nobody fixes anything.
And usually I do, and I've seen other directors, you do it right before it's going to be the end of the scene, and then they don't have any choice. I just, this is my chance to, your husband and Natalie Wood on his debut was one of the most profound
Splendor in the Grass.
If anybody has not seen Splendor in the Grass, again,
It's still
recently,
really...
it's an astounding film, Elia Kazan. And the vulnerability they caught in terms of youth is remarkable.
Yeah, incredible.
Really
it is,
something.
and it's one of those, the themes of the movie are just so timeless. I haven't seen it in a while, but...
You know, one of the things I love about your husband's, I love his selectivity. He only does something when he really thinks it should be done.
Don't say that.
Yeah, but...
I want him to do more stuff.
Yeah, but I think that...
No, it's true. He's always been that way.
Yeah, and I think that's really special. I think that we're too driven sometimes to think we need to keep working, and sometimes we don't. We need to absorb what we need for the next project.
No, that's very, it's one of his virtues, is he has always known, and everybody, on this project, he has been teased by his friends, and because he started talking about making a Howard Hughes movie in the 70s.
Right.
And so, he wanted to do, he did it in the way that he wanted to do it. So he ended up making a movie that is of the time that he's in. So anyway, he's always been, he hasn't done as many things as most of his contemporaries. So he's just one of those, like Clint Eastwood, he just goes and does and does and does, and it's great. Well,
his stuff is great, but it's Clint Eastwood. I mean, I don't see...
But he's made some great movies.
He has. He's made some fantastic movies. But I'm just saying that Warren's movies are all very different.
Yes,
Do you know?
they are.
They're just
this
very
one is
distinct.
too.
And I just think they're both admirable in their own way.
Yes.
But people need different
Some
things.
people just go quickly, and
yeah.
some people need more time.
Do you have a dream project that you're dying to do?
It's funny. It's generally whatever I'm working on is what I'm most, captivated by. I have to admit. Although I would like to do the play "You Can't Take It With You." That is one play.
I love
and
that
I did
play.
a reading
I
of
did it in
it.
summer stock. It's a fantastic.
Yeah, no, and we did a reading. Oh my God, we did a reading. We had so much fun to raise money at UCLA, and we had all these. William Shatner was oh my God, he was so much fun.
I bet.
He was a devil. He was a devil, and he was just oh God, we were screaming. We had so much fun. But that's what, and I just saw it on Broadway. It was great. They just did a great. Byron Jennings was in a great production.
Byron's wonderful.
And so anyway, and I just thought, I want to play that part. Penny or whoever, the writer.
Yeah, Penny. Yeah,
I want to play
the wife. The wife. Yeah, it's a
Someday.
splendid play. That's an interesting thing about Kaufman and Hart as a director, because if you, when I was doing Once in a Lifetime, it's endless exposition, and so I, in my brilliance, proceeded to cut it away in the first scene. Well, as we put it on its feet and it hit an audience, as soon as we hit an audience, something wasn't happening in the third act. And it finally dawned on me, it has not been set up.
Oh,
and
you
those
cut out
guys
the
were
setup.
so brilliant. Every time I put a line back in the first scene, it paid off 2 hours later in the third scene. I mean, that's brilliant. We all have to respect what each other does. Deborah, you wanted to ask a question.
Yes, Deborah May.
Do you wonder why I didn't call on her? She'll sing for you if you'll ask.
Tom, you know, thank you. Tom, you mentioned that you shot Night Mother with Anne Bancroft and Sissy in sequence, which I
Yeah.
think is so extraordinary. And Annette, have you ever shot a film in sequence from top to bottom?
No, I never have. I would
The
love.
hardest scene at the end.
Oh,
do
my
it
g-
first.
Yes, if the location is the same location, they'll do that. No, I have never done that. They try to do things as much in order. Of course, everyone wants to do that. Every director would love to do that. But no, if it's if it's a big arc, then I generally one of the things when I'm working on it is I look at the schedule. I know that I'm doing that in the first week, and that's in the second week, and that's in the, and you get a little bit of a sketch in your head to begin with, because of course, yeah, it's so crazy that way, right? How you have to sort of imagine where you're going to be. But that's always how it's been. Yeah,
One of the things I always
would
tell,
love to.
I always tell, we're all dependent on the costume designer to tell us where we are in continuity. They're the only ones that their entire job depends on having you in the right costume on the right moment. And to me, it's what holds the cohesion together. So whenever I get confused, what day, what hour, what time, they know. You've been fantastic. They're standing, hovering. And now they brought out all
They
three.
brought my purse and everything. They're like, please stop. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. This was so much fun.
Thank you.
I had such a good time.